Craig and Giark actually have a third friend. I just don't remember his name. I learned of
What?
him recently.
There's that you're going into the Tomax and Zaymot? There's a third twin? There was a triplet?
There's a third, lost at birth triplet. Yeah.
There's got to be some G.I. Joe fanfic about the triplet, the Tomax and Zaymot triplet. And where's that on your fancy bingo card, by the way, Mr. Bingo Card? Where's Tomax and Zaymot on your bingo card? Tomax and G.I. Joe fanfic.
Good. I'm glad you brought this up because can we agree, like $100 million, like that's great, and we're going to talk about that plenty. But getting our own customized bingo card app, come on.
No, there are things that money cannot buy.
Yes, I mean
there are things that money cannot buy.
Presumably, money could have bought that, but I'm speculating.
No, I mean, but there are things that money can't buy. I don't know. I can't name any off the top of my head, but I'm
exactly.
In the abstract.
Yeah, no, it's true. I agree with you in the abstract. Absolutely.
Where's our boss? Is he here?
Did you not? Okay, he is allegedly calling from the car.
I told him to download the Discord app. This is not that complicated.
Yes. You mean like where is he? I told him to be here. Yes. Oh, there he is.
There he is. Man, myth, legend.
Yeah.
Our boss, Steve. How are you? Looking for mute. Not finding it. Well, I'll tell you what $100 million can't buy. The mute button.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not even going to describe what I've been fighting because it's just a self-own. So, but if it works now, it works. I'll take it.
It works, and that's all that matters.
Exactly.
And again, I think, Steve, I'm not sure if you saw the not just the Oxide and Friends bingo card, but the Oxide and Friends bingo card generator app that was made.
What?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good, and we're already. I think we're already crossing off squares
like
here.
8 people are already shouting bingo right now. Yeah,
exactly. That's right. I mean, audio problems are kind of the center square. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Audio problems are the center square. But,
yeah. Let's get going.
Oh well, hey, it's good to be back. First of all, we were on a little break. We were little summer vacation. It's nice to be back. Nice to be back, kind of in full strength here, and back with some big news. We raised a bunch of dough, which is very exciting.
Very exciting.
Well, we didn't just raise a bunch of dough; we announced that we raised a bunch of dough. So that's a something.
We did also raise it. Just to be clear. Not to alarm.
We did also raise it. You know what? I guess well, actually, so one of the things that was kind of funny here is that there's regulatory compliance when you raise a bunch of money, and that regulatory. So there are people namely people that want to sell you things that sit on these kind of Edgar filings, and so what was it, Steve? Maybe 10 days ago, one could have seen that we had raised money because of the and I guess, Steve, they walked you through. I guess companies do this that wish to not disclose that they've raised money. There are things that you can do that are basically shady to avoid this, right? You can like file in states versus filing federally. Or what are some of the things
that's
that
right? Yeah,
do?
When we raised our Series A, our legal counsel informed us that you have this filing you must do within 10 days. That is it's giving kind of like filing with the federal government that you have raised money, and there are ways that companies will file differently so that is harder to find. So you can file state by state, and that is, I guess, harder for these people that sit on these things to discover. And the reason companies try to do this is because they want to make an announcement and they don't want people to kind of end run it and publish it before they can make some sort of a splash. And folks will go so far as to just ignore the requirements from the SEC and hope that it's just it gets overlooked. And so we were faced with this choice. Not really our speed. So for the Series A, I remember this is like 2022, and they're like, a lot of people aren't necessarily following this strictly. So what do you guys want to do? And we're like, I think we want to follow this pretty strictly. And then again for this raise, I guess lawyers are always want to sort of lay out all the choices, and they said again, you can, but they advised that folks are now paying much closer attention to following this strictly. We were never going to do anything different, but it was it definitely. What happens is a bunch of people start emailing you and trying to do business with you, trying to loan you money, etc. That is evidence
bunch
that
of
the
people.
raise is out there. Yeah.
I mean, Steve, I think you probably learned that the Edgar filing had hit the same time I learned because my phone started ringing. I mean, literally, with people that want to sell you all the things that they want to sell. A series. I love the people that want to sell you PR services after you've announced the raise. It's like also Oxide.com. We're not interested. We're not interested. Steve, have you been getting
Another one this
Oxide.com
morning.
mail?
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh my
Of
god!
course.
And so, Steve, we're telling the story of Oxide.com because we looked into Oxide.com in 2019.
Yeah.
And my recollection was we found kind of a domain broker who could go approach the owner of Oxide.com. Oxide.com has been sat on and fallow for 20 years or whatever. It's never been anything, to the best of my knowledge. Unlike Verb.com, Adam, where
Yes.
I feel like now I feel like I feel an obligation to hit some of the more esoteric bingo squares
to fill out the bingo card. Yeah, for sure.
Bingo card. I mean, surely this is a true Fishworks deep pull. Steve, the Fishworks office used to be the office of Verb.com.
Okay, but how do we know this?
Adam, we're not making that up, right? That
No.
sounds like such a .com hallucination. But we would get their mail, right?
No. Not only would we get their mail, we would get their mail, and some vendor, I think it was like Verizon, had like some massive credit with them, like owed them $6,000.
Right.
And I can't even estimate how much time we spent trying to war game out how we could get that $6,000. Like I called them at some point, like on speakerphone, everyone like huddled around being like, yes, I am Verb.com. Please send me a check.
Hold on. Let me pass you to my boss, Mr. Verb. Yeah, that is right. Right. It was kind of it had this kind of like this caper where we had to pull off that we were Verb.com. It is amazing. That is the kind of thing that we would hallucinate for ourselves, but that actually happened.
Yes.
So, and then we could also, part of the problem when your name is Verb.com, I would love to know literally anything about Verb.com, the company. It's ungoogleable. Verb is, I mean, this is not a surprise, but Verb is ungoogleable. So Steve, we approached the domain broker, approached Oxide.com, and what is the number that you remember? I'm trying to, like, if I exaggerate this number in
$400,000.
Okay, I've not exaggerated. That's what my memory too. It's $400K. They wanted $400K, and as I recall, like we were told a good opening offer was like $200K.
That's right.
And which was
about $195,000 more than we were prepared to pay.
Or 199, 999.
Yeah, 199. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we ended up getting OxideComputer.com for $9.99, and I swear Oxide.computer, we got that for like 99 cents.
That's right. That was a cheapie. Did you see the post on the .computer explosion on the back of the raise announcement? And now's your chance to land grab .computer out there.
I've often said that success teaches you nothing, and I love the idea that the owner of the .computer TLD is now. It's like, no, it is the fact that they called themselves .computer. Look, they raised this $100 million Series B
on the back of that domain.
And so and Steve, I'll let you on the punchline. What name is completely available right now? Did you read to the end?
Oh no!
You missed the drop. No, the drop is like, and folks, hardware.computer is available for the next $100 million Series B company. You're like, do not name your company hardware.computer. Maybe
talk about ungoogleable.
Talk about Googleable from the makers of Verb.com.
Yeah.
Verb.com has finally gone hard tech with hardware.computer. All ungoogleable. So yeah, that already. Right
when you want to discount this entire corner of the economy, you have the island of the country of Anguilla, however you want to pronounce it, that has done 25% of their of the GDP is on .ai domains.
Good for them.
Hey, listen.
Good for them.
Good for
Yeah,
them.
I agree.
I mean, they're crushing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely. And Oxide.ai. I mean, have we not registered that? So
We registered in that country as soon as this round went through. So yes, we are .ai. That's a joke.
Is it,
Um,
God,
we should probably clarify that one.
Yeah, should have let that one hang for another second or two because
Right?
it definitely, had me chomping down on it.
I'd go
I'm
to
like,
you.
wait, what?
Yeah. No, but the did you check to see if the same domain broker was the guy who came back inbound this week from 2019?
I did not. I mean, you must have been like, I want to reply to this guy and explain to them. It's like, your opportunity to sell us this domain name was in 2019, and admittedly for $10.
That's it.
But I am tempted to reply because it's like it's kind of annoying at this point. Because I'm sure they're hitting you up too on LinkedIn and everywhere. Mail. I'm getting texts. It's like, all right, Jesus Christ, no, we don't want. The one we did look at buying seriously was oxi.de. Adam, was that your idea?
No, but you guys at Joyent had no.de and
we had no.de, yeah.
And I thought that was terrific. And when I told you I thought that was terrific, you're like, yeah, it's fine.
It's kind of fun. It's kind of argue about it. And oxi.de, I think they wanted, Steve, they wanted something much more reasonable, but I think it was like 5,000 or 10,000 euros, something like that. And we're like,
too much.
Nah. Yeah, too much. We're going to go with Oxide.computer. And I'd like to say the domain name has not been a problem. Also, it has not made the company. So the contrary to the blog entry about the power of the .computer TLD. So that all started to happen. We got, and kind of so much, like, you would think that, like, God, the number of recruiters that contact us are like, I've got a candidate for you. It's like, haven't we shot our mouths off enough about the way we hire? Like, how much more do we need to say? But it's like, it doesn't matter what you say.
Are you starting to get, I actually even got some of that spam, and it's getting highly tailored. Like, I think LLMs are a huge boon for those kinds of spammers. Where it's not just the form letter, but it's something highly customized based on content that we've produced.
Oh, interesting. And interesting. The first recruiter that says, like, I've got someone that's got great materials that they'd like to submit. I'm like, okay, all right. Now you've done your homework.
Yeah.
Steve, I can only imagine what your LinkedIn has done, because mine has become a little challenging with people trying to sell me products and services. If you are connecting to me and we have any connection whatsoever, even if it's just like, I'm a fan of Oxide, if you could please attach a note, that would be great. That makes a big difference when you attach a note and offer some context.
Speaking of context, you mentioned that we raised some money. Do you want to talk about that? Like, do you want to talk about, like, what we raised and from whom? I know you wrote it down in the blog post, but I thought it'd be fun to repeat.
Yeah, Steve, go for it.
Yeah, so obviously the headline, we raised $100 million. We were very, very fortunate to, and I think kind of coming into this, it may be fair backdrop just to describe how we were thinking about the next capital raise of the company, because at every step we've wanted to both make sure that we were properly capitalized so we could invest in the right areas of the business, but not getting out too far ahead of ourselves. And again, through 2024, we were really focused on getting repeatable processes around how we build the product, how we ship the product, standing it up in customer environments, getting a good cadence of software releases, getting a good cadence of customer installs and then expansion projects. And we felt like we were at a good place where it made sense to then go do the next fundraise and capitalize the company for what would hopefully be the next 3 or 4 years at minimum. And when we started talking to prospective investors, there was a subset of them that had been doing their homework. I mean, which I know should sound like it is minimum entry to being in the venture capital space and engaging seriously with prospective portfolio companies. But these firms had clearly like been spending time following Oxide, getting to know who we were, doing their own research in the field with companies that could be potential customers, and when in particular, when we met USIT for the first time, um, they knew a hell of a lot more about Oxide than we would have expected. Kind of any investor, but in particular, had really done their homework, like really both in researching Oxide, but also again, kind of in the markets. And so I don't know, Brian, what your take was, but I think when we first sat down with them, it was unlike many a first VC meeting that we had had previously.
Totally. And if it's worth mentioning too, maybe Adam just said a little, I know you don't like it when we provide additional context, but so we had raised a series, so you mentioned we'd raised a series A. So the first capital into the company was called the seed round. There's been this kind of ridiculous, do you call it inflation or deflation, Adam, when you've got pre-seeds and pre-seeds and all these like different modifiers on seeds. But I think for us, the first capital in was a seed round. It's called a price round, which set a valuation for the company. We then raised a series A, which was a price round, and set a new valuation for the company. And so we were, Steve, I think when we met USIT, we were not raising. And we had raised our A, but when you're a VC funded, VC backed company, you always need to pay some attention to what the milestones are for that next raise. And when, if a firm wants to get to know you, you generally would want to get to know them, because I think one of the things that, we have learned is that when it takes a while for anyone to make an investment and to get conviction in any company, but especially Oxide, where we're very contrarian in many ways. There's a lot to get to know. And so we're pretty biased on getting to know folks over a protracted period of time. And Steve, I dare say, like, the investors that we actually really like have that same disposition about portfolio companies, about wanting to get to know them for some extended period of time.
But I would say, I mean, and yes, and like want to get to know companies for an extended period of time, and also want to do the work of getting to know the company without it only being through the company.
That's right.
And that takes real work, and it turns out. And when you have investors that are truly curious and like do real work in researching everything that surrounds the company that they're thinking about, and also the company themselves, you get to fast forward to much deeper, better conversations faster. Which
totally,
definitely been the hallmark of the investors that we have had on the cap table, and then certainly new ones that we're adding.
And I think, Steve, it's also always like the second meeting that is. I mean, the first meeting is definitely interesting, but you're just getting to know folks, and and you're giving them context, you're learning more context. For me, for USIT, it was that second meeting that really stood out, in part because that was the first time I think we met Liz Stein. And I think it was between Liz and Kevin Gaetano. I just remember the five of us all gathered around the John von Neumann statuette from Brian, that listener of the pod. I mean, reference to a previous episode on our, I think it's the Lipvutan episode. Mm-hmm. Where we talked about the statuette, and the bingo card activated but just the fact that you have VCs that recognize who John von Neumann is. I mean, Steve, it reminded me of when we were first raising, and we were, I think, out of frustration, when we encountered Eclipse, it just felt like oxygen, because we actually finally had VCs that understood like computers at all. And I remember joking to them that we had thought that we wanted to make it a prerequisite of anyone that spoke with that they could name the CEOs of Intel and AMD. Yes. And at the time, Lisa Su and the much more forgettable Bob Swan, the Millard Fillmore of Intel. And I remember Lior saying back, Lior Susan at Eclipse saying back, if that's your constraint, like you'll be raising only from Eclipse. Like you're basically, I can tell you that like VCs are not going to be able to name the CEO of Intel.
Which in fairness, we had learned as much spending a couple of weeks on Sand Hill before that meeting. Like
yes.
it was definitely we would spend most meetings describing the importance of building both hardware and software together in holistic products for big industries. And with that meeting in Eclipse, within like what, a minute and a half, they stopped us.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, sorry, we 23 of the world's 25 most valuable companies do hardware and software. You definitely don't need to make that case here. We're like, ooh, okay, we're home.
But in terms of like when you have a race like this, it's a long kind of courtship, frankly, where you're just getting to know one another. And we really, I mean, I thought that second meeting, at least for me, Steve, was where you really began to see, because it was very clear they had just done a lot of homework between meeting 1 and meeting 2. And, I felt like every time we met them, it was like, wow, this is more and more interesting. And I think that the feeling for them was mutual. And then, we you begin to get into talks about like, what does a future financing round look like? And I think one of the things that we really liked about them, because we weren't raising, right? We didn't actually, we didn't do the Sandhill Shuffle and line up everybody and over a kind of a 2-week span where you've got 2 meetings a day, 3 meetings a day, and you can run a process like that for sure, and that's what we would have done. But boy, if you've got the right investor that gets to know you and wants to, I mean, calling it a preemption is a little strong, but basically has a vision for what the company should do and is willing to get a term sheet behind it, it's awfully tempting. And for USIT, the more we got to know them and the more they got to know us. And then I also like the fact that they have really big aspirations for us as a company, which is great. They share our aspirations and really see the capacity for this to be the kind of company that we believe it can be. And that kind of reflected in, they wanted us to, they're like, hey, we think you should go big here on the Series B. And it's great. So that's how we ended up.
We were thinking about a smaller number, and I think normally, sure, if a VC is like, oh, we think you should raise more, you're like, well, yeah, of course, you have a bunch of capital you're trying to put to work. In their case, it was, we feel it's important that you have sufficient capital for the following reasons, and they walked through the same kinds of things that we had been thinking about internally for areas of investment that we need to go make. And so it's definitely a much more rigorous thought process, well informed. They'd done their homework, and it bode well for what would be our lead in the Series B.
Yeah, Brian, in the blog post, you talked about USIT asking great questions, and a few folks have asked, what were those questions? What kinds of things were they asking about that was so differentiating?
Yeah, first of all, I love that question. I love the fact that people are observing that because the reality is a lot of firms don't ask great questions. And it's one of the big changes in VC. It used to be, a generation ago, that all venture capitalists had been entrepreneurs. So they'd all been on kind of our side of the table. And over time, as venture kind of became its own, maybe you could say that venture started to stand on its own 2 feet, but became its own domain, you have an increasing number of VCs that have never actually been on the other side of the table. And I think that there are pluses and minuses to that. But one of the just consequences of that is that VCs don't realize what other firms ask. And what's really interesting is that they don't all ask the same caliber of questions by far. And often when you are getting, first of all, I mean, Steve, love to hear your perspective on this, but from my perspective, when someone says, I've got a technical question for you, that's like bad question alert. It is just that's just an indicator that it's like, this is going to be someone playing gotcha, or someone who wants to show you how much they know, or someone who wants you to acknowledge how much they know, or someone who wants to remind you that I was technical once, and so like the questions that are prefaced by I've got a technical question, first of all, are not that technical at all, and are often not very good questions. The questions are often very good, at least at that kind of surface area, that kind of first level of questions, are when folks go, I've got kind of a dumb question for you. That's like good question alert. That's like you've got, because you've got someone, and there's a little bit like someone who's kind of revealing their own disposition. And if someone's saying I've got a dumb question for you, there's a degree to which they're saying like, I'm curious about this domain. I'm learning more about this domain. I'm not trying to show you how much I know. I'm trying to learn more. And I always found that like the questions that they would ask would get really, really interesting. And there were certainly some questions in that category of questions that were not even like phrases like I've got a dumb question, naive question for you, but were like simple questions that reveal real depth. There are a handful that I'm sure Steve and I can ping pong on the ones we can think of concretely. I'll give you one that is a simple question, relatively speaking, that USIT is the only firm to ask about, which is, hey, you're doing hardware and software co-design, which we think is great. Talk to me about the mechanics of getting hardware engineers and software engineers to really work together. What does that really look like at the kind of the mechanical and organizational level? Which I think is a great question. And there's a lot we can talk about. Steve, I think many of our answers pointed to podcast episodes. We need like an in-office time.
Oh, are you saying not everyone did? Because I think it might have been everyone.
I think it might have been everyone. But it's which is great. Like that you can be able to say, like, hey, listen, like here's the and we would often point people to different podcasts. But that to me is a concrete question that USIT is the only firm to ask that, and it led to a really fruitful discussion, and I think a real appreciation for the team that we built and kind of how we had constructed things that they appreciated and I appreciated. But I've got other examples too, but I want to get.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely a couple that kind of caught us by surprise, just at the level of depth and rigor. I think maybe just at a high level, one of the ones that I liked that was not just like a bullseye shot to some implementation detail in the product. Is I remember they were asking about how we think about the tension of, or just the motion of vertical integration, how far to vertically integrate the system, and technology partnerships
Right.
that we make. Yep. And it's a very good and a question that led to a bunch of good discussion, because we definitely highly value our technology partners that we are building with and around, and then also want to make sure we are delivering a complete system and experience to the end customer. So part of those relationships are making sure that we're all working together in service of a complete product that makes it easy for customers. But anyway, that was one that we had not, that folks had not, we just hadn't had as good an in-depth discussion around. I remember, like, man, some of the at depth were around our next gen switch we're building, which is I'm sure one on your your bingo card.
For sure, absolutely on my bingo card. Yeah, this was uncanny, I think, too. This question, yeah, but go ahead.
Well, so just as the setup, we had, of course, built our first generation of switch in the Oxide rack product is based on Tofino, the Tofino 2 chip from Barefoot, then acquired by Intel, then a casualty of Intel leadership, RIP Pat, and
oh god, Diet Coke almost came out my nose.
Sorry, and we, but as we had a bit of foresight, not anywhere near as much as any customer should, of a product that a major company is providing. We ensured we had built up a big inventory of Tofino parts so that we can continue to manufacture and sell hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands. Like we have years and years of runway on that product line. And in the meantime, we are building our next generation switch that we've talked about here on the podcast, based on the X2 part from Xite. And in conversation with Xite, among the things that we really liked, their affinity towards programmability and lots of technical value in the part itself, a bunch of cultural alignment, values alignment, and we. But one of the things that we struggled with, one of a couple things we struggled with Intel around the Defino part, was being able to get that lower level software. So we had a better way to reason about the part when it's in service and trying to figure out what's happening in those lower layers of the part. But Intel was just had their claws around that lower level IP and felt that exposing any information about that was going to compromise their competitiveness. So that was always a point of friction. It's like, we could only do so much about what we could see, and then have to infer about what was happening at lower levels of software in the chip. And so one of the things that was really important to us, an opportunity with the Xite team, was to open up those lower layers, starting with the ISA, the instruction set architecture. And so we had been discussing that with Xite, and I think Xite was equally excited about being able to lean into an open architecture, which makes it easier for people to build on, and just helps to get much more reach, leaning into openness, not away from it in fear of competition. And then I think it was kind of in the midst of that. I mean, we had announced with Xite had announced opening up the ISA, and then USIT came in with this sharpshooter question.
Well, they asked specifically about, like, okay, you've got like the instruction set architecture, great, that's open. What about the control registers? Do you have access to the control registers? And that's a very sharp question.
That is a technical question. They can prefix that with "this is a technical question" because it's enormously technical.
Also, the best technical questions are not prefixed with "this is a technical question." It's kind of like, it's like you don't need to say, "Hey, this is a funny joke." It's like, this is not a funny joke. Yeah. And it's no, that was not prefixed with "this is a technical question." That was just more like a kill shot. And we were like, "Are you what?" And actually, Steve, I remember you and I were both like, we have put this in the board deck somewhere, because they got our previous
or else
board decks,
or the building is bugged.
Yeah, because this is an issue that had been a real issue of concern for us, and about the getting access to the control. And the reason is why is this important? So a switch, you've got it, and we fortunately we're very excited that Xite has opened their X2 ISA, which is great. So you can get the full instruction set architecture. It's also very important you can get access to the actual control registers of the device itself, because those control registers that's what you need in order to make your own true runtime and then be able to deploy all the software in the switch. The reason that it's very hard to get to those kind of control registers is because there's often third-party IP that can be there that you don't want to expose as necessarily an abstraction. So that's tricky. And we'd been kind of going back and forth with Xite about getting the information that we need to go build the software that we need. And, as we're going back and forth with them over this, we get this question from USIT. And I was just like, they must be echoing this back to us somewhere in the material that we have highlighted this as a risk, because Steve, I think we try to be pretty good about highlighting genuine risks at the board level, and felt like a genuine risk. But then you and I both looked at the board deck. It's like, we did not mention this. So where are they getting this from? And as it turns out, when we had the pleasure of meeting the technologist that they had engaged to do due diligence, and asked him, like, where did you get this from? He's like, oh, I just know that this is a problem. Like his career has been in semis, and he's like, I just know this is a real issue. And I wondered how you were, just wanted to make sure that you had the access that you needed to go build this thing. So it's just like a well-informed very good question. And also, it was also in kind of the spirit of that question was not it was not this kind of like headbutting kind of spirit of trying,
Yeah.
trying to dominate us or what have you. It was really in the like, I just want to make sure that this is something that you've thought about and that you're on. And of course, we thought about it a lot. And I think they were more than satisfied with the answer they got. In part because we actually do have all that access that we need.
But I think, and then
that
like
was a great question.
65 questions sort of in between the highest levels down to the really detailed, and it just gives you and because the other side of this that we haven't spoken about is that you're having a bunch of conversations with a bunch of interested investors, and all of which are trying to preserve optionality because that is their job, is to give themselves an option to invest all the way up into a point in which they decide not to. And you will have to spend time with those that will want to act as if they are deeply aligned and long-term thinkers, and they are going to be good operating partners as you go forward. And it turns out a bunch of them are like, yeah, and can you, do you have one more enterprise deal you can share, or 10,
Right.
or 100, or, if I could just get one more X, then I can get this other partner over the line. And when you meet someone like the crew at USIT, you're just like, okay, actually, the entire thrust of the conversation is how do we be prepared for the next phase of the company 3 years from now? And because these questions are coming from a place as if one were sitting in our seats going, okay, what are the things that can kill us in the next 12 months, and then 24, and then 36, and then to really attack 5 years thereafter, what's all the foundation that we have to have in place? And none of that's going to be explicit, but just in the tone and the type of the questions and conversation, suffice it to say, we were getting more and more excited about potentially partnering with USIT.
Well, I guess another thing that I really appreciated, Steve, we had USIT out for, as things are kind of advancing and they are getting more and more interested, they're asking broader and broader questions, and we're wanting to have them go more and more in depth with the company. And we had them meet a big cross section of the team. And one of the things that I really loved is their interest in meeting the team. And we just had everyone. We actually wanted to introduce everyone, and we actually, Adam, you were there. We wanted to like just have everyone introduce who they were and why they were at Oxide, and it was extraordinary. And it was, I think they came away really appreciating, and this has been always true for them. This is not true. You would think that every VC firm would really care about team composition and would want to get to know the team. Most don't. They kind of like, they want to talk to, the CEO, and then they kind of will draw their conclusions about the team from that. They really shouldn't. They should get to know the actual team. And USIT really did, which was great.
Yeah, I think everyone sort of took the opportunity to introduce themselves and went around giving a minute or two of sort of why they came to Oxide, which was unprompted. Although I think by the end of it, USIT might have been like, that was well orchestrated and well prompted, Oxide team. But it was a great. Usually we push for shorter introductions in meetings with like partners and others, but in this case, it was well worth it.
Well, I think it was worth it for them to see just kind of the depth that people feel in terms of this company, in terms of why they're here, and as an investor, you should be asking this, but again, most don't, and it's another in the class of very good questions that they were asking. So there were, I feel like there were a bunch more where that came from, Adam, but that's a good kind of cross section of some of the very good questions that they were asking.
Yeah, those are great. We got some other questions, both from Hacker News and social media and Discord. One of the ones that stood out to me, and it's phrased, I'll give you the kind and then the unkind phrasing of it. Adam Thomas is in the chat, said, "What are the bottlenecks in Oxide that you most want to spend investor money on?" And then someone who will remain nameless on Hacker News put it much more simply: "What do they need so much capital for?"
Listen, do you think this Diet Coke is going to buy itself? I mean, come on.
Seriously. Liquid Death, Diet Coke.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just in terms of areas of where we have known that we wanted to further invest behind and that we want to go invest in now. Some of the more straightforward ones include being able to keep our lead times from customer order to customer delivery short, even as we are scaling up. And it may sound simple. It's like, oh, well, you just sort of buy more materials and have them lying around. And yes, inventory is important, but actually, that part of it, you want to that person's question, which is a very good question. You don't want to spend equity dollars on materials, especially materials that are in service to a customer's order that is a financeable activity. So when a Fortune 500 company is ordering equipment and you need to buy materials for that equipment, that is often uh, a purchase that a bank would finance for you in order for you to be able to get a float on the material purchase with a very high confidence that you are going to receive payment on that purchase order from a customer. So you'll hear of like lines of credit or debt financing, and you usually want to use a financial services partner for materials inventory that you are buying that is going to go in service to a customer order. But you don't always have a customer order in advance of when you need to buy materials. So, for example, we've got 500 different parts in our bill of materials, some with very long lead times, some with very short lead times. And for those that have very long lead times, you do not want to be doing just in time ordering. Even though, yes, from a financial perspective, you can get debt financing can cover off on that purchase. You really need to have those materials in advance, or else you could be facing lead times that could extend to. I mean, you will often find like at a particular time a Cisco switch is on a 52-week lead time, and we should not find ourselves in that position if we can avoid it. And so in terms of being able to meet scale up of operations and therefore be able to service larger orders from our customers and keep lead times in the band that we want to keep them in, you have investment in things like how many lines you have running at your contract manufacturer, how much real estate you have for assembly of the systems. There's investment to be made in the logistics capabilities and delivery and service and warranty. But I think one of the bigger investments that we want to make is continuing to grow the team in the areas that we need it. That is expanding our engineering team, expanding aspects of our operations team, and that is the thing that you want to use equity dollars for. And I'll pause there because there's a bunch of other places that we want to go invest, but I think to the Hacker News comment, your goal is not to go spend all the money that you just raised. You want to make sure that you have got a long enough runway to where you can build a sustainable business that is now not running like fundraise to fundraise to fundraise. And we think doing this raise at this level gives us that, while at the same time being able to invest in a bunch of important areas that we need so we can deliver better and more service to customers.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, I think in order to scale, because I think, and we've got some questions related to this. We do not have our own manufacturing facility, right? We work with a contract manufacturer. So on the one hand, this is much less capital intensive than people think. I think people think hardware and they think like, oh my God, you've got your own manufacturing facility. And it's like, no, there are lots of ways to actually be capital light when you are still making a physical good, especially when it's not a consumer good. But you also need the war chest to be able to go get favorable terms, and I mean all the things you need to be able to do to secure long lead time parts. All the things that Steve mentioned, it's not like that doesn't cost $100 million. but having that kind of capitalization allows you to go do these things on terms that are really favorable. So you actually do need to raise the capital in order to be able to be able to scale manufacturing.
Yeah, we had some other questions related to manufacturing, like that people knew that we were working with Benchmark, and is that going to continue or expand? And then other questions about international, shipping the product international, building the product internationally, with some subtext around tariffs. Anything you want to say about kind of manufacturing expansion, international manufacturing, or shipping internationally?
Yeah, I think first, big fans of Benchmark Electronics, and we believe they can handle just about any scale we throw at them, which is exciting. Now, with any contract manufacturer, doesn't matter big or small, um, giving them predictability and giving them forewarning are the best ways in which you can give a partner the best chance of success when scaling up quite a bit. So yeah, no, continuing to be strong partners with Benchmark Electronics. We are definitely focusing on where our customers want us next. We've remained focused on the U.S. market for this first what is now like 18, 20 months into the commercial market, and with a careful eye on where we're seeing a concentration of customer interest. We are seeing interest all over the globe, but there are some markets where there's higher concentration of that are easier to begin opening up or making Oxide products and services available. So you will definitely see Oxide available in more and more markets here soon.
Yeah, and I would say the tension there is and we've said from the beginning, we absolutely know that a huge chunk of our revenue will be outside the United States in the limit, no question, for a bunch of reasons, right? And I think that a bunch of the things that we tack into are, I think Roman Patrick called this cloud nationalism. There are a bunch of reasons why people want to keep things in country. So there are a bunch of reasons why we'll have customers abroad. But the tension with that is that Steve and I have both lived a company that may have had a slightly reckless international expansion. And if you want to light a lot of capital on fire, an overly aggressive global expansion is a terrific way to do it. And we also don't want to do that. So that's kind of the needle we are trying to thread, and always with everything on an eye towards customers. So we are going to go where we've got customer demand. I will say, Steve, one of the things we did do to get ahead of that is we had our episode on getting compliance on Oxide, the Chamber of Mysteries. There you go. Is that a chime? Are you clanging a bell?
Actually, I just picked up my pen and accidentally hit something, but yeah, just really.
There we go. That's pretty good. That
going
sounds
analog.
They're going analog. That was only for compliance in the U.S. We wanted to make sure that we got compliance in the EU, in Japan, some other important international markets. So we've done that recently as well. There are some things you need to do, some kind of prep work you need to do, and that work costs money. So this is where that international expansion it is very helpful to raise for that international expansion. We're still going to be careful as we do it, though.
Nice. I think the last time we did an AMA was around the initial product launch, and at the time I was reminded of the Passover tradition of the questions from the wise child and the wicked child and the simple child, and the child who does not know how to ask. And I was definitely reminded of that again as I subjected myself to every one of these Hacker News comments.
Can I just tell you, I think of this because I learned of this Passover tradition from you, Adam, in that episode, and I now think of this whenever I am in Hacker News comments.
I know
it feels like it is an evergreen for Hacker News.
I know it's and so I did end up categorizing them this way a little bit. And I wanted to start with, I feel like I actually accidentally started with the wicked child a little bit, but to get back to the simple child, there were a couple of, I thought, good, simple, earnest questions. One of them was, what percentage of enterprise IT compute has not moved to the public cloud? And another one is, if someone else's software is running the hardware, then what difference does it make if it's on-prem or offsite?
Yeah, that's a good question. Which of those should we? I feel in terms of the first question, what percentage of enterprise IT compute is not moved to the public cloud? Isn't it whatever number you want it to be for whoever you are? I think
I
isn't
think
that
that's
like
right.
isn't that a pick'em? I
No,
think
no, no,
it's
no, no.
like
First, you have to launder that kind of desire through a consultancy, and then they come up
yeah.
with the number that you wanted it to be.
I think that what we know is there is a lot of enterprise IT that has not moved to the public cloud and is not going to move to the public cloud. It's significant. I think it's hard to say beyond its significance. And Steve, I'm sorry if you want to mute me and actually give us like, no, we actually have the specific, I got the number
No,
right
no,
here.
we paid a consultant to say
Yeah,
the number was.
Listen, I just got off with Garten. No,
That's right.
I think what we have said is contrary to a bunch of popular narrative. It turns out everything is not going to the public cloud, and all you have to do is talk to large enterprise customers, and they will educate you very, very quickly the realities of the broad IT needs that they have, and that where one once may have believed that they might be able to push a whole bunch of stuff to the public cloud once they got 30% in, 40% in, 50% in, realities set in, which is like, it's great technologically. And it is where I would like to be able to run much, much more of my software, but it is pretty expensive and I don't have good governance. And these are not absolutes, right? I mean, of course, this is all, these are all nuanced, but it is, I am going to have on-prem IT for a very long time. And whatever the number is, the other element of this is that like 20% of the global economy is on the internet today. And there's just a whole bunch more coming that is going to run both in the public cloud and on-prem. So it is a very, very large market that is growing. It was interesting. A reporter was telling us that they'd seen that the trends of purchasing for infrastructure on-prem were only growing slightly and public cloud was growing. Well, if a bunch of stuff was moving out of on-prem to the public cloud and it's still growing, that tells you that there is a lot of new being deployed on-prem. But to Adam's point of just like, whatever suits whatever publication suits kind of your narrative, I think we like to turn to a pretty good expert in the space. And if you listen to Andy Jassy from, I think it was the Cube. It was an interview at possibly reInvent big conference recently, and I think it was end of last year. And he said that 85% of IT infrastructure sits outside the public cloud. Now, that is in service to how much AWS's opportunity is.
Exactly, and that's why we should be an $85 trillion company.
There you go. But no, I mean the reality is it's a lot. If you go talk, but also, and public cloud is super compelling because it helps your business to move faster. I mean, for all no one has to describe the value of public cloud computing these days, which is all the more reason why we felt like you should be able to have those same benefits on-prem.
This tacks into a comment that I categorized as wise, and it says, it talks about DIY, but then at the high end, I think the market is literally infinite. Maybe he means figuratively, but every large company should want this and want it now. Cloud providers are extremely expensive, and outside of the one tier where prices really are outrageous, they perform poorly and often offer little support. This really feels like the future. That was a heartwarming comment.
Yeah, and I feel actually, Adam, that comment is effectively an answer to the other question you raised about like, if someone else's software is running the hardware, what difference does it make if it's on-prem or off-site? And that question is kind of actually only getting at one of the reasons to run on-prem, which is this kind of risk management reason. And there are reasons why, when you are running on your own physical machine in your own on-prem DC, yes, it's very different than running. It's not just the fact that, of course, you're running someone else's software, but there's a big difference when it's operating over an air gap, right? There are a whole bunch of risks you take off the table. But that's only looking at kind of one aspect of running on-prem, which is this kind of risk management angle, which is important, but it's not like the only reason. And this other comment, Adam, that you just read gets to this other reason of like, there are big economic reasons. And Steve, you and I have always believed that the economic driver is the big one. that there are, when you get to a certain scale, you don't want to rent all of your compute. You want to own some of it. It's just really the economics of it, and not merely the risk management and some of these other aspects.
That's right. And the economics, and then what used to be the case is the economics of public cloud were a little, they were steeper and harder to stomach in certain circumstances. On-prem, you at least had cost predictability. And then, of course, along comes Broadcom. And now cost predictability is out the window. And the difficulty for CFOs and CIOs in the public cloud of like, yeah, but I know my numbers all over the place. And I'm sorry I can't pin it down, but this is just the realities of public cloud. You now no longer had cost certainty on-prem. And that's what is putting folks in a bit of a bind right now, trying to figure out how to forecast.
Well, and this is, I mean, Broadcom is giving new meaning to the Jeff Bezos quote of "Your margin is my opportunity." It's like Bezos is aimed at competitors. Broadcom is aiming at its own customers. And there's a degree to which I think one of the frustrations that we have heard from Broadcom customers is like, these price hikes aren't going to end. Like if I could absorb one of these and have total price visibility, but I just feel like there's no, this is now feeling like and Steve, you and I, we got together with a bunch of sampling of folks in IT, asking what is the top priority in IT. I was actually, I don't know what I was praised for, but the number one issue for everybody was cost containment. And I think because just as Steve mentioned, it used to be that on-prem and running VMware kind of gave you that cost containment, and that cost containment is now gone. And people feel like, I am desperate for some kind of cost containment. I've got to get this under control. And the public cloud, we've heard over and over again about initiatives where people move to the public cloud, especially large entities, and they tap their budget out when they have only done a fraction of their move. And now they're kind of stuck in this hybrid world. And they're realizing that, this is not, the public cloud can't be the answer for everything. I love the elasticity, I love the velocity, I love the agility, but I've got to get some cost containment, and I've got to be able to know how much this thing's going to cost.
Nice. Let's see. Some of these I've categorized that wise. I feel like should be properly categorized as wicked, but I wrote down.
What I want is like a Hacker News feature where instead of upvoting something, I can vote something as wise or wicked or simple, and
or doesn't know how to ask. Yeah.
Or doesn't know how to ask. And I just think this would be, I think it'd be super helpful. I honestly do think that. I think this is a great, and clearly, I mean, this is coming from an ancient tradition. I mean, this
that's right.
I just feel that, there's something very Lindy about this, so I think that it's, I think I have to look into it.
So one of these wise/wicked comments was, I was skeptical as well, if only because just being a better product isn't enough to win the market. Everything we hear about Oxide seems like an impressive greenfield implementation of a data center, but is it enough? Do people make buying decisions at this scale care if their sysadmins have better tools? Which I think is a great opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is and I think that is a wise and wicked question. I agree.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that what folks might not realize is that especially for people that are looking closely at Oxide, the people making the buying decisions have themselves a lot of experience operating in the cloud or operating on-prem. And they are, and maybe we're self-selecting for the kind of terrific customers, but the kinds of questions you always love it when people ask you a question where you're like, wow, who hurt you? I mean, this is coming from such, very specific kinds of, so a lot of the decision makers that we're talking to, you can ask them describe a firmware bug that has injured you in the past, and you will get an interesting answer, right? And one could say well, that's not, that okay, but you're self-selecting for nerds. It's actually, but the nerds are the decision makers in a lot of these companies, and this is more common than not. So I think it is, and it's not just the level of because the wise/wicked question asks, do the people making buying decisions at the scale care if their sysadmins have better tools? It's not merely kind of a quality of life for the people actually operating these systems. It's their ability to scale what they're doing without having to scale the cost. Goes back to that cost containment. Like, how large a team do I need to run this thing? Is my team going to have to focus on applying bias updates, or can my team focus on actually delivering the value that we need to deliver to our customers? And people care a lot about that, and a lot about bang for the buck and allowing their people to do the things that they need their people to do, not this kind of toil that you get with the extant on-prem stack. So yes, people do care.
I mean, yes, your SREs, their quality of life really, really does matter. But also, so do your developers, and that's an argument that just in the last decade seems to have resonated a lot more at the top of organizations, where they actually do care about the folks that are building a lot of the software products and services that customers are building for their own customers. But the one that is definitely growing in importance is security. And it turns out that, like, where it maybe once was the security office was sort of the bad cop that was just there to make sure that people were following like proper updates and being able to meet an audit at the end of every month, that the actual systems that a company's important data is running on, that they are more and more looking for a systems that can give them confidence about the attestation of those lower level systems. And so I think it is making the lives of SREs, the engineering teams, the CFO, and then also the security teams, like, they're where some of these things were of lesser importance 4 or 5 years ago, they certainly have grown in importance today. And yeah, it matters.
Yeah, I feel like every time we have a customer come by the office, someone with a very robust title will end up asking a question way down in the weeds. And I always get the sense
Yeah.
like they didn't want to have to know that. It's not because they were themselves hands-on doing that. It was because they were systems down for 3 days, so found themselves really needing to investigate. Often they're like networking questions that I find completely inscrutable, but seem happy with our answers.
Well, and I would say, like, never judge a book by its cover too in this regard, Adam. Just as you've been surprised, we have been surprised about the level of low-level details that people care about, and it's always great when someone cares about something that we've thought a lot about. I feel like there have been a bunch of these examples. I mean, Steve, I think for us, one of the ones that really stands out is we were at a VC event, which packed with venture capitalists, and so we were discussing with like the kind of not great questions you get. You kind of have a low bar. And I was stuck in a coffee line next to a VC that looked like they were going to go clubbing later. And I was just like, oh, God. And I kind of dreaded being in a conversation with him. But I was like, I can't resist. And kind of talking a little bit about Oxide. And he's like, just please tell me you did something about the fucking NIC. I'm like, what? Like, you know what a NIC is? He's like, yeah, like, cabling these systems is awful. And I'm like, you spent time in a data center? It's like, yeah, that's where I came up in the data center. It was awful. And like, you had all these miscabling. And I'm like, okay, well, actually, we need to actually go show you the rack, actually. And so we had an Oxide rack actually at that event. And it was pretty wild to have someone, and I never would have, but of course, like, a lot of people have felt this kind of pain. So I think we continue to be surprised about the people that have a great deal of empathy for what we've done.
Yeah. I thought this was an interesting question. Someone wrote, I don't disagree that there's some fat margins in the cloud, but how is vendor lock-in any different here? Companies could end up paying fat margins to Oxide too, while still managing physical gear and plant.
Absolutely. And I think that is, something that we're very mindful of, is that, how do we, and the tension is, how do you deliver someone an integrated product and yet also alleviate some of the fears about being locked in? Because also, especially people that are coming from Broadcom, like, hey, I'm kind of coming out of a bad relationship over here. And, how do I earn trust that you're not going to do the same thing to me. And that's a multifaceted kind of thing that we, certainly I think that being transparent about a company, but as what we've done, being open source is really important for that. Being very upfront about like, here's what our model is. Here's the economic model of this thing. Being very upfront about the fact that, the software is built in and that that when you buy a rack, when you get a support contract, software comes for we will update the software and the software will get better over time, but that's trust that really has to be earned, and so I think that it's a very legitimate question, but it's one that we've certainly thought a lot about.
Some of the questions came, I think, from your alts, Brian, and I was going to read a few of those.
Right.
Aside from the actual product, On the Metal and Oxide and Friends are really great podcasts that manage to make programming topics entertaining and educational. Brian Cantrell is a wildly entertaining and knowledgeable host in this at the same time. His co-hosts and guests are great too, I guess. And
co-hosts and guests are great too.
And I attribute a lot of that to feeding off his energy and storytelling. Highly recommend, especially for Rust folks.
Okay, look,
So,
I'm sorry, but like I didn't see that second swipe coming. I said the first one of his co-hosts and guests are fun too, but then to come back to the point again and be like, only because they feed off of his energy.
Yeah. So that was a good one, Brian.
Look, Adam, I know that that was a very hurtful comment, clearly, and that does not. I mean, I would just like to remind you that people at the office, when they meet me, they ask where you are. So I've been on the other side of this plenty. Where
no,
it's
that's
like,
that makes sense. Got another one, Brian. You absolute legend. You've the best technical seminars I've ever watched and countlessly rewatched. Thank you for inspiring a generation of engineers. Best of luck with everything at Oxide.
That's got to be my 13-year-old.
Is that B Cantrell?
Yeah, exactly. B Cantrell number one fan. That just feels
actually,
like that.
This is from a great handle, which is Keto Mojito. Terrific handle on Hacker News. And then a little. You mixed it up and made this one a little more incisive. You said, "I always believed in Brian, but the day I heard the buzzword cloud repatriation, I know there was a market."
I introduced some grammatical errors, some punctuation, and I tried to mix it up a little bit.
No, LLMs have been a real boon for you laundering these alts. No, for sure.
Exactly, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Obviously, very flattering. But I would also say that, like, on all of this stuff, and I think people hopefully realize that it's very much a team effort on all of these things. I think it is interesting that they keyed off of the buzzword cloud repatriation, something we have actually not used. I mean, Steve, you are not wild about that term. I think
it is, especially when it gets used in a way to describe like, people are just like trying to run off the cloud as fast as possible, and it just does the transformation. Like cloud computing has been seminal to so many things in the last 15 years, and because of its architectural properties and what it allows companies to do, and it is not people running from modern technology and services. I think what's even more interesting is companies that are very large public cloud computing customers who need more than just that footprint. It's not that they're trying to get off the public cloud, but they have a bunch of business use cases where they need to serve a lot more of the economy than just the public cloud economy. If they are a big data storage platform, their total addressable market is data people are putting into the public cloud. How do they service, the 95% of data from a very large bank or some other institution that's sitting on-prem, and they need to expand beyond the public cloud. And I feel like cloud repatriation doesn't do that kind of broader, bigger, more important use case service.
But hey, if that's what gets someone to,
it's fine. I know.
to know there was a market, we'll take it.
Yeah.
I just thought you could have used a different word in your comment in Hacker News.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, listen, the LLM did this one. I've actually, thanks to agentic AI, I just actually hooked these things up and let them go.
This one I thought was sort of interesting. Oxide is doing some great things, but there's only so much you can do with firmware tweaks. A CPU running any load at all is going to completely eclipse the power usage of everything else in the system. Incremental improvements from things like more efficient fans and reducing the number of power conversions is great, but the power draw from the CPUs or GPUs is on another level.
There is truth to that. I mean, that's obviously like indexing on one aspect of the product, namely its efficiency. And there is certainly truth to that. In that, like, yes, the CPU is what is consuming the vast majority of power, but it's also like it's not telling the full story. In that I mean, as we said repeatedly, like the cooling, especially air cooling, it is an issue. And especially when you've got a system that's not really designed holistically for it, but then also just the ability to not have observability about where the draw is happening, I think is a more acute issue that where like you just can't even answer the question about how much is going. And I feel, I mean, I remember when we started out, and I can't remember if we talked about this in our episode with Robert or not, Adam, but like the one of the questions that we as we were starting with the 15 kW rack power budget, which now seems kind of quaint in the world of AI, we wanted to know the draw of a DIM, and which feels like how hard is it to answer that question? It's like, oh, very hard. It really depends on what that DIM is doing. And then like the number can go from like a watt to like 12 watts. And, you kind of view that 12 watt, or that kind of that upper end use case as being pathological, but you actually don't know on a running system because like that stuff adds up. Like QSFPs add up. The U.2 drives add up for sure. Those things can, I mean, there's a computer in every one of those drives with DRAM and so on. The DIMMs add up. So it's not, I mean, yes, the CPU is the largest source of draw and heat in the system, but this other stuff really adds up. And if you don't have the observability to know what's what, you don't actually know. So I think that's as important as anything.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, it's like if you are trying to take measure of how much work you can get done per watt, there's another important vector here, which is utilization. How much of the system that you're running you actually are utilizing at any one time. And unfortunately, if you were to ask, an enterprise CTO today what their average utilization is in their environment, it's like 20-25%. So in addition to lower level system energy efficiency, the orchestration, how how you are doing placement, how you are opening up resources, how you are turning down resources, all that orchestration that the cloud hyperscalers are very, very good at, so they can run at very high utilization, back to the aforementioned margins. That is a really important part of getting much more out of the footprint that you have, and that's all in software, Upstack software.
So a bunch of nice congratulations from John Masters on Twitter, from Adam Jacob. Ryan Dahl says, I'm impressed that there's no mention of AI or LLM in the announcement. So
thank you,
kudos
Ryan.
to us.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, that was very deliberate.
Yeah, I did.
Compliment from Ryan, for sure. It's a compliment. I totally appreciate that. Obviously, we worked with Ryan and Joyant. That was very deliberate, actually, to not mention it at all. Not because there isn't applicability, just because I think that there is, and God, Steve, we saw this especially on the Series A announcement, being like, as we're talking about, what does the press release look like around that? It's like, can't you guys say anything about AI? It's like, can't we just talk about what we built actually? And then and there's applicability. There are absolutely things we can say about it, but there are things we can say about lots of different verticals. And anyway, so yeah, I appreciated that. I'm taking that as praise.
I'm sure you saw this one from Kirill. It said, I worked with their product and I was 100% sure that they had raised just a bit less than $500 million. Doing what they did in 6 years for $89 million is insane, literally insane. I think he does mean literally.
If you want to accuse me of having alts, that's the alt to accuse me of having. Yeah, it is. I really appreciate that because I feel that what we and someone else had asked like how much capital have you raised total, and that kind of answers that question. This more than doubles the capital we have raised, and yeah, that's a real testament to the team. And I think we've been careful and prudent without being, I would like to believe that we've been thrifty without being frugal. That we've hit some good, and I think the risks that we've taken have all been prudent. So yeah, I think I'm really proud of what we built as a team.
Yeah.
On the capital we've raised, and I do think it's important that people realize that we're not. Someone had asked earlier, it's like, does this mean you're going to be hiring a lot more? Yes, it absolutely does. But we're also not like we don't have a preconceived notion of sometimes companies raise a lot of money and they lose track of what got them there, and you can absolutely expect that we're going to continue to hire as carefully as we have hired, and we're going to continue to be very prudent about the way we expand the company, because we've got our shot, and that's what this capital is about. But I can't remember, Steve or Adam, if we've said the comment here, but one of the comments that Steve and I got that really resonated with us was from a veteran entrepreneur and technologist who we'd pitched early on Oxide, came to Oxide a couple of years ago, saw what we'd built, kind of looked around and be like, God, it'd be a real shame to fuck it up now. and it's like, yeah. I mean, oh, put it on the wall. It'd be a real shame to fuck it up now. So we've got our shot, but we're very aware of the fact that it's one shot, and we need to be very prudent about. We on the one hand need to expand in all these different dimensions, and on the other hand, we don't want to blow it.
Yeah. There was this very sweet comment that Brian, you pointed out to me. Good for them. I used to walk my dog past their office warehouse in Emeryville, and when the weather was warm, they'd have the doors open and the giant server stacks just sitting there looking awesome. I guess it's not really a concern for someone will steal something that looks like it would take a forklift to move. Anyway, I thought that was a sweet one.
I think that
I mean,
was
they're
great.
on casters, so they roll. But
Oh yeah.
They do. This is where we got to give credit to CJ, who on our operations team. Whenever we've got some malpractice going on in the office, he's very good at being like, what we're going to get for these gates? A lock. So the poster neglected to mention they're actually behind locked gates, so you can see them, but you could probably hop the fence, but you're gonna make a racket doing it. Just come around and ring the doorbell. We'd love to give you a tour. I did love. I just feel like, and also that comment, I don't know if you saw the reply to that comment, then expanded on how reckless it was for us to be, begging for these things to be stolen or what have you. You're just like, oh my God. Every Hacker News comment, we just cannot stay out of the gutter over here.
Yeah.
I was a little surprised. What I was expecting a little bit more of that we got kind of none of? People going back to some of the skepticism when we first raised. I mean, we've been a number one Hacker News story a lot at this company. We were a number one Hacker News story when we announced that we had raised, and we had, a lot of skeptics. And no one really going back to that thread, revisiting those skeptics. It was more like just repeating exactly what those skeptics. I just feel like, okay, it's gonna have 6 years and $189 million later. It's gonna take a lot more than that. I don't know. I'm sure we'll be doing. I mean,
call someone down on a shoe bet. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Someone had said online that they would eat a shoe if we ever shipped a product. But so I guess that's not going to happen.
Yeah, TBD on that one.
I also think it's like, and I'm kind of doing it here. I also think that overwhelmingly the tenor was positive, and I don't want to sound like I'm kind of like holding on to these few naysayers and haters, because overwhelmingly the tenor was positive, and we really appreciated it.
Yeah, remarkably positive. I mean, I know that even the ones I highlighted as positive ended up having some wicked child tinge to them, but it felt like the vibes were very positive.
It did, yes. And it also felt like for every one of these kind of Hacker News things, it was just like, oh my God, there would often be someone replying to them. That's just like, okay, I actually don't have to reply. It's
not just Steve.
Exactly. He does deserve the Hacker News Purple Heart, though, that guy. Silver Star.
Absolutely. Question, I don't know why I waited so long to ask, because I'm sure it's on everyone's mind. Someone asked, how does this impact Oxide's future as a podcasting company?
I think it assures it, Adam.
Solidifies it indefinitely.
I think if there is one thing we can say with absolute confidence, we've been renewed for a couple more seasons. So
Exactly.
yeah,
This
we're gonna be
this
around
one
for a
was new
while.
to me. Someone asked, "Have you ever done a chin up on a server rack?"
I saw it. New to me. That one, I'm definitely like, is that one of my kids? This feels like one of my kids has now gotten into this is kind of the way my kids would troll me. No, I haven't, and I'm
Yeah,
not sure I
obviously.
could.
You don't do chin ups on a rack, you do pull ups. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
what kind
Pull-ups,
of
okay.
buffoon is this?
that's right. I would be worried about tipping hazard. I realize that it weighs like a lot more than me
It weighs a
and
lot.
leverage and stuff. But even when it's rolling down that ramp and starts to get a little inertia, I do get worried about crushing danger. But
Yeah,
that's just me.
there's a tipping danger. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a fair concern.
There you go. A bunch of folks had questions that I would put in the category of roadmap. One of them, kind of like, was any plans for Ampere?
Yeah, great question.
Hmm.
And I think we've said this before, but just to say it again, super interested in Ampere and ARM. Um, it Our basis for comparison is AMD, and Ampere has historically loved to compare themselves to Intel, which I can understand why. I mean, absolutely. But when you look at AMD, it's less interesting. And I think we had a terrific podcast with Chips and Cheese on AMD Turin, and then I did talking about our Cosmo bring up. And we're very bullish on Turin, and we really, we see that as a really nice, big, fat, sweet spot. And we're not opposed to ARM in the limit, but right now we've got a really good running room with
Yeah.
AMD.
Yeah. Also, unsurprisingly, question about GPUs, and then an interesting one saying, well, "What about Cerebrus?" With this, an observation that folks are going to more of these rack scale systems, dropping in at a time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's for sure interesting. I mean, obviously, Cerebrus kind of a sibling company. I think that I think we're interested, right? In terms of acceleration more generally, I think we've talked about it, but a bunch here. We are in the limit. We will absolutely have an acceleration in the accelerators in the sled. We're trying to figure out what that looks like because we need to find a way of doing that delivers Oxide value. That and when people kind of think, well, why don't you just take I don't know, just take a bunch of GB200s and throw them in a sled. It's like, okay, but why would you buy that from Oxide? I mean, we can do that, but there's a bunch of things that we do that are, I mean, there's a whole bunch of that system that we would not be able to not just control, but we can't attest to in that. And we can't, if you're having a problem with that GPU, we want to make sure that we can support it. And that's hard to do when you've got a real kind of a proprietary piece of hardware there. I think we've said many times before, we're really interested in what we're seeing out of AMD and the MI400 and that kind of line. But we want to make sure we're delivering what customers need. So we are eyes and ears open for sure. And I think that in the limit, you're absolutely going to see it from us. But we've got our dance card is pretty well punched in at least the immediate future with the things that we need to do for our existing customers.
To Brian's point of like, we want to make sure we're delivering Oxide value. It does turn out that when you have a cloud computing control plane and you've got telemetry and observability into the underlying power substrate, and you can do things that are pretty interesting from an energy efficiency perspective, there actually is a bunch of really interesting value that you can bring when it comes to acceleration. So it is squarely on the roadmap. And just if we think about trying the comp to be more of a cloud that is on premises, we have to be able to support multiple generations of CPU, multiple types of acceleration in the limit. And what should be consistent as you're getting more and more new things is like the cloud, you don't have to replatform. You're using the same APIs, you're talking to the same services, you just have different instance types. And I think customers are definitely excited about having those same benefits applied to accelerators. And as Brian mentions, we've got a lot on our plate. But this is part of why this raise is important, is because it's going to allow us to invest in just the team increasing, so we can support some of these parallel efforts that we have to that we want to get in customers' hands.
Yeah, and I think just in terms of like the specific use case for that acceleration, there are a bunch of different ones out there. It's not just inference, not just training, not just LLMs, not just AI. But I do think that there's a lot of HPC use cases out there and so on. I do think from an AI/LLM perspective, the use case that's interesting for us is inference on-prem. So I think that is one of the kind of questions that we've got, is what is the right way to deliver that inference, and does it need to look like it's in a CUDA package, or are there other ways that we can go do that? Because there's one of the interesting aspects of Moore's law slowing down is that you are able to get really competitive cores that look different. The accelerator cores that look different, that are close to your compute. And I think there are a bunch of different models here that are really interesting. And if we can find a way to deliver that Oxide value in a way that's going to deliver that end user value, I think when we had the James on from Cerebrus, he were talking about, what people are actually buying is kind of tokens per second of inference. And I think if we had that kind of clarity in terms of what folks want, I think it would guide some of our decisions.
Yeah. A question I know the answer to, but I'll let you guys deliver the bad news. There are many questions of the form: what about for my home lab, or a desktop, or a 1U, or a laptop? What's the Oxide plan there?
Yeah, I like the fact that you're lumping all of them together, so we can get everyone in the room together and disappoint them all at once.
Kind of. I mean, you want each of those individually? I can do it that way.
Yeah, listen, it's just going to be easier
Also,
if we just do this. Right. If you are receiving this email, it's because your interest in Oxide is, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, home labbers. It's all open source, like knock yourself out. I also do think that, like, one of the things that we have appreciated at Oxide is, boy, consumer hardware is a whole different level. When the volumes are really, really high, everything is so much harder in so many different ways. And there's a degree to which, Gergely Oros said that we're a startup on hard mode. And like, there are degrees which that's certainly true. Steve, I don't know how you feel, but boy, I think like consumer hardware is so hard. And there's so much yet more engineering that needs to be done. And I think operations is really tricky. Sorry, home labbers and
all hard,
laptoppers.
all hard. And it's not for lack of wanting in the limit to be able to get Oxide in more and more people's hands. But yeah, it is, of course, you can imagine, if you are faced with, to an earlier question from someone about when Oxide can be in more markets, and you're like, okay, well, we can either start down the path of getting regulatory compliance done for a new market, or regulatory compliance for something that is going to run in someone's home. These are indirect tension. So yeah, unfortunately, we are focused on the enterprise as far as the eye can see.
I would say, though, that just to reemphasize that it is open source. People can exceed, and the chat is also emphasizing this. You can actually run it, and if you're potentially interested in joining us, especially on the control plane team, like running it in your cobbled together home lab, running Omicron on you can absolutely run Omicron on commodity machines, and it that can be a really educational experience. So
yeah, and typically, like, not only do we do it, like folks who were not at Oxide, though now are at Oxide, have done it. Both the control plane, the storage software. It's not just BS. Like, not just there's the open source repo, go for it. But people have done it and made it work.
Absolutely.
So wrap it up. I just want to say, Brian and Steve, I know that you're going to shrug this off, but congrats on this fundraise. $100 million is a big fucking deal, and just in absolute terms and for the company. And I know it's a team effort, but you guys were really out front on this, obviously, and it's a huge accomplishment. So thank you for that.
And Adam, to which I will say that, like, I absolutely appreciate that. I also, just to make him feel even more uncomfortable, Steve is the one who's really out front on this, and there is a lot of there's a lot involved, and not just because the dollar figure is big, but holy God, the level of the minutia that needs to be negotiated. The number of times that Steve has had to deal with lawyers on from any VC firm. This has been true for many, many VC firms. Our lawyer and a VC firm's lawyer both swearing that they have never seen the behavior of the other in their entire career. I mean, Steve, Steve said that to you with just there's so many little things that need to be dealt with to get this done. So, Steve, terrific work.
Or when they tell the business teams to drop off and the lawyers will stay on to keep discussing the points as the cash register just keeps ringing. But
yeah, let's rate the meter is
we'll
running
take it from here.
for everyone.
We'll take it from here.
We're gonna drop you. We're gonna drop you off and just drive the cab around a little bit. So we'll let you know what the bill is.
We're gonna race our 2 cabs around the city.
Race our 2 cabs, exactly. It's like. But wait a minute, you're racing both of the Ferrari cabs? Can you, if you're going to do that, can you at least like race the much cheaper Pinto cabs? That's what Ray calls
rather
it.
not.
Actually, rather not. This race is really important. It's like,
we love our investors. We also love the idea of not spending quite as much time with such a broad group of investors for a very long time. So that and to bring it full circle, I think honestly it is. And we said as much internally when we were getting this done, but it is all on the back. I mean, that moment where we had a bunch of the Oxide team going around and talking about their past, why they came to Oxide, what they want to go build for the next 10, 20 years, like that was why we're doing it. And it makes the last part of the raise just more kind of semantics. So it certainly makes it a lot easier and good to have it behind us. And now we can go build and get back to customers.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And Adam, thank you for living off of my energy.
I was going to say, I just feed off your energy, Brian. That's all I do.
Exactly.
You bring the energy and I just consume it.
Listen, someone's got to absorb it. I mean, it'll burn the house down if no one else absorbs it. So it's like, this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
So, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And it's good stuff. Really excited. And thank you, all of you. So many of you have been huge proponents of Oxide, and boy, do we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, Morris Chang said he was going to show in person, and we kept extending the episode. I'm like, God, Adam, just give him 5 more minutes. He wants to. He told me he wants to come and say it in person, but next time.
Next
raise.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, exactly. Next race. It's got to be a bigger race.